Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for another InSync software webinar. Today we're going to be talking about CentralSync. CentralSync is our InSync configuration software that allows you to adjust the adaptive parameters of the InSync system. Right here what you see is the basic screen of CentralSync when you first launch it. So there's two ways of launching CentralSync, either by launching it through your Windows application, or you can also launch it through the InSync web user interface. Once you launch it and load up the current configuration, which can be either loaded from a current connection to the intersections out in the field or from a saved local copy of the configuration. In this case, I've loaded up a saved local copy of a corridor. So when you first bring it up, you see a Google Maps background with the intersections as dots and some blue connections between the intersections, which are used as the tunnel connections or tunnel chains, which provide coordination between intersections. So as you look at this screen, I'm gonna walk around the different areas of the screen and what it means. In the top right, you'll see what we call our property sheet. And our property sheet is context sensitive depending on what is currently selected. So if you select an intersection by clicking on a dot on the map view, it will bring up information about that intersection in the property sheet, such as GPS coordinates, IP address information, time synchronization, server data, and so forth. So if you click on a different intersection, that information changes in the property sheet. Now let's look at clicking on a tunnel between two intersections. When you click on that, it will display more information in the property sheet, such as travel time, what phases are connected for the tunnel chain, and so forth. If you follow that down on the screen on the right side, you'll see a list of different configurations that have been created. In this case, there's been 4 different configurations created for different time periods of the day. AM, off-peak, PM, and tunnelless, which runs without coordination between intersections. In the bottom right of the screen, you'll see the scheduler, and you can either add a configuration to that scheduler by clicking the plus sign and selecting the configuration and choosing a time frame, or you can adjust already configured configurations in the scheduler by dragging and dropping the edge of the scheduler to a certain time frame desired. If you wish to input a specific or event configuration, you can go to the specific tab. Once you're in there, you can click the plus sign and choose a configuration, a day of year, and a time of day for that event configuration to run. That's useful for any sort of planned events, such as fairs, sporting events, things like that. Okay, back on the map view, you can also choose to look at the corridor in a satellite image as well. If you zoom in far enough, you'll see phases display, and that's where you can input what phases are active at a given intersection. So if we zoom into this intersection and right-click and hit Edit Intersection, you can then edit the phasing of the intersection that are active. If phases are ever added or deleted out in the field, you can then come in here and match the configuration from the field in CentralSync. So that's the map view, the property sheet in the top right, the configuration list in the middle right, and the scheduler in the bottom right. Now the next screen I'm going to show you is the tunnel tab, and you access that from the bottom tab right next to the map tab. Once you've clicked on that, it brings you up a time-space diagram with time on the vertical axis and space on the horizontal axis. So for example, if I select the off-peak configuration, you'll see that InSync displays a time-space diagram of the off-peak configuration. In this specific configuration, you'll see that there's 3 intersections coordinated with a wide dynamic period range, and you can see that by the pink band in the middle of the time-space diagram. So if you want to adjust what the dynamic period length range is, you select the dotted line in the middle of the time-space diagram and then view the property sheet in the top right, and you'll see that there is a minimum period and a maximum period defined for that configuration. From the time-space diagram, you can also see the tunnels for each respective direction, as well as the non-tunnel time. So if you hover over the white space between tunnels, you'll see the non-tunnel time, which is how much time can be allocated to any movement outside of the tunnel phases. So InSync dynamically allocates green split time based on the queue and wait time it sees on all approaches. As you select either the period or the tunnel in this tunnel tab, you'll see in the top right that you'll have a variety of different parameters that can be configured for the adaptive configuration. And you can, if you ever want to refer into more detail on what exactly each parameter means, there is a good help user guide in CentralSync that you can access from the help menu in the top left. Okay, so that's the tunnel tab and the time-space diagram. So now if you're looking at some of the more advanced adaptive configuration parameters, you select an intersection and click on the Optimizer button on the right side. Once you've done that, InSync launches a menu of more submenus. So in here, you can select a cell in this menu structure, and when you click on a cell, it brings you up a submenu of more parameters. In this case, this is what InSync considers its allowable states menu, or what phase pairs are allowed to run at each intersection. So in this case, certain phase pairs are allowed to run together and certain phase pairs aren't. So the ones that are allowable are selected and the ones that aren't are unselected. The next column over is the permitted sequences menu. In here, you can select and deselect certain sequences that you want to run at your intersection. In this case, all allowable sequences have been permitted to operate at this particular intersection and this particular configuration. But based on user preference, you can disallow certain sequences through this menu. The next column over that we're going to talk about is the light limits. In the light limits, you can access the minimum green time, the green restriction time, which is InSync's version of a maximum green time, and you can actually see right here that that's blank for each phase. Well, there's a reason for that. InSync by default computes the maximum green time or the force-off time of a phase automatically and recomputes that every single second. So by default, we don't usually input anything into the green restriction field. Additionally, to the right, there's the amber, the red, and change times. And those are all used to match what is configured in the traffic controller at the intersection. The next column over is the maximum detectable queue sizes menu. In here, you can manually adjust the queues that InSync sees. So a couple different use cases for that are the first one being to inflate the queue that InSync sees. So maybe, for example, you have a camera view that the approach curves off and the camera can't see the full queue. You can go in here proactively and inflate the queue. For example, if InSync sees 5 or more vehicles, schedule like there's 20 vehicles present. On the opposite end, you can also cap the queue. So for example, if you want to cap a queue at 10 cars, you can go in here and say if InSync sees 10 or more vehicles, go ahead and schedule only like there's 10 vehicles. So there's 2 different use cases you can use this for, but it's primarily used for an artificial queue adjustment. The next column over is the gap and occupancy menu. In here, you can adjust how InSync gaps out a phase. So there's 2 different ways that InSync can gap out a phase. It can gap it out using the traditional time-based extension timer, or it can use the percentage occupancy to extend and allows InSync to gap out a phase based on the number of segments triggered in a total detection zone. Finally, you can adjust the pedestrian phases and walk, don't walk, and ped recall settings in the pedestrian phases menu. In here, you can enter in the ped phase name, the walk duration, the flashing don't walk duration, as well as what we call our auto press functionality, which is similar to a ped recall feature of a controller. Keep in mind that the walk time and flashing don't walk times are inputted in here to match what is in the controller. And that's the optimizer settings menu. The final menu I want to talk about today is in the email notifications button on the far right of the screen. In the email notifications, you can configure either text messages or email notifications to go out to a variety of different users, and it can be configured on a time of day basis for each user. Additionally, you can subscribe to certain notifications from a list of, there's about 15 notifications here that you can subscribe to. Each user can be independent and can subscribe to different notifications. Some examples here are light in flash, pedestrian button stuck, InSync startup, camera in fog mode, things like that can be subscribed to for email notifications. Additionally, you can configure the SMTP server settings for your email server to configure it to be sent out from the processors out in the field. And that's a general CentralSync overview of the software. If you ever need more detail about any of the menus, any of the parameters I went over today, you can either access the Help menu at the top, or you can browse our video training library at rhythmtraffic.com. Thank you.